What's up, Bears fans? Welcome back to another edition of the Willis Twin Towers podcast. How about them Irish boys and girls, I should say? Where's Jake Griswin? He should be in this chat right now because I know that guy's a big Irish fan. And for the rest of you guys who love the Irish as well, what a big win that was last night. They are on a roll lately. They've been playing excellent football. They didn't look so hot first half, but then they came on strong in that second half. They've dealt with a ton of injuries. Marcus Freeman's a great coach. We've been talking about him for a while now. He's obviously not ready for the Bears job by any stretch, but he's a great college coach, and Notre Dame's going to be good for a long time. So, anyways, we'll probably talk about that game a little bit. We got to talk about the end of the season for the Bears a little bit as well. But obviously, we got this coaching search underway now. There's been some interviews that have already taken place. There's been several that have been scheduled to take place that will be coming up soon. So we'll go over all those. We've got a list for you guys that will show you of who all is going to be interviewed and who all has been so far, as I said before. And we'll just kind of dig into our favorite candidates as well. I've got a list of my top 5, and Tim does as well. So we'll get into that, guys. Please, as always, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and you can follow us all on X at Barroom Network as our executive producer, Aldo Gandia. I am at _Jeff Willis, and my partner here to the left is Tim Willis. I'm sorry, at Tim Willis 24. And I'll switch it over to him in just a second. But a quick reminder, as always, guys, please fill up the chat with any questions and comments you have, and any questions that you have for us, we'll do our best to get to by the end of the show. So without further ado, let me switch it over to Tim and give us your thoughts on the last game the Bears played, or the game last night with Notre Dame, or whatever you want to talk about to get this thing going.
I'm pretty well past the Bears right now as far as play on the field. I know we weren't here last week, but I was obviously super happy that they were able to beat Green Bay. I don't care about the pick, where that it moves us down. I don't care. I was just happy to see them beat Green Bay. It's been since 2018. They were due. 11 straight losses to Green Bay is unacceptable. So I'm thankful and glad that they were able to get the win. I don't care who the head coach was. I do care who the quarterback is. I'm glad that it's Caleb Williams, but I was just glad in general. I wouldn't have cared who the quarterback was, who's the defense, who's the offense. I don't care. I'm just glad that they beat Green Bay. And it wasn't like they beat their backups. The starters were in for at least the first half of the game until they started getting hurt. And that was, for the majority, it was still most of their starters. So I was super happy for that, super excited to see a Bears win. I'm glad they ended the season that way. But I want to talk about these Irish, Jeff. I'm super, super, super ecstatic. Notre Dame's first national championship berth since 2012. And that was, we all know how that went down. Just an absolute butt kicking by Alabama, 42-14. But I'll tell you guys right now, with the way the playoff structure is now compared to the way the BCS was back then, it was, Notre Dame was 12-0, but they didn't play in a conference. The schedule wasn't super strong that year. They were a great team. I don't want to take anything away from them, but they weren't ready for a national championship berth like that, not against teams like Alabama. And it showed up. Like they just weren't ready for those teams. Brian Kelly, in my opinion, is never going to be a coach that can beat the top elite college football teams year in and year out. He just can't. It's just not in his MO. Marcus Freeman is proving that he can beat ranked teams on the road, at home. He has an excellent record against ranked teams at Notre Dame. Only a few losses, maybe 1 or 2. So he's been excellent. I love it. I love how well Marcus Freeman is doing for that program. And he's really starting to bring them back to the elite prestige that Notre Dame is known for. But I got to also say, that last championship team, totally different from this one. This team right now is an absolute contender this year. Do not sleep on them. It's been really hard for me to get on the bandwagon, especially after the Northern Illinois loss. I just kept looking at, here we go, same old Notre Dame. But I got to tell you, they've played lights out football, and it hasn't been perfect by any stretch of the imagination. The first half yesterday was awful, but they responded, and they responded well. This team is well coached. They don't quit. They want to play for Marcus Freeman. They want to play hard, and it shows. He's a great coach. And, like we've talked about before, he's not in our list of candidates for the Bears, but he is, in fact, a candidate for the Bears. He was. I don't want to give away too much information, but Jeff and I have a very, very, very good source. And we can tell you that Marcus Freeman was, in fact, reached out to by the Bears. That did happen. Obviously, the extension came moments later or days later. So he's staying at Notre Dame. He's not going anywhere. But he was, in fact, a candidate, which everybody knew that was talked about because Kevin Warren likes Marcus Freeman. So, but in any case, this team is ready for a national title, in my opinion. And I think it's going to be that way for a long time coming. I think this team is going to be a perennial playoff team. And guys, the first year of this new format, and they've won 3 playoff games. That is incredibly impressive alone. It's hard to win 3 games, especially against top-ranked teams like they are, top 10 teams. 3 of them. That's impressive in its own right. And, without having that bye the first round, that's a big deal. And I think it just goes to show, too, you look at the teams that are left, the final 4, they were all the 5, 6, 7, and 8 seeds. That should tell you right there that the seeding structure is poor and they're going to have to make a change. I think they know that. I think they know that you can't give the bye automatically to a conference champion because, as we've seen, the conference champions all bombed out pretty quick. So,
well, there's a chance that they could keep it that way just to force Notre Dame to join a conference because they want them to do so in the first place. I mean,
why would they? They're not going to. I really don't think that's going to.
A whole other can of worms,
I don't think they're going to only do it that way to force Notre Dame's hand. I know they want Notre Dame in a conference, but they're not going to do that. I think that they realize that this structure did not work, and they're going to have to change it. Not just for Notre Dame, but look at the teams that are left. None of them were a top 4 seed. So that should tell you right there, especially with teams like Boise State who don't play in a Power 5 conference. It's stupid. It doesn't make any sense. It's got to be eliminated. At the top 4 teams, the bye should be the top 4 teams by seed, period. By ranking, not by
Doesn't
conference.
Boise State play in like the Big 12 or something now?
It's the Mountain. The Big 12 is not a Power 4 conference anymore. It's just not.
I'm not like big in college football like I used to be, so I don't really pay as much attention to other teams. I just kind of like scout players that will be going into the draft as it gets closer to the season. But
right.
There are a couple guys
they use the Pac-12 and the Big 12 also as Power 4s, and they're just not. They're not Power 4 conferences. Arizona State probably really didn't belong as a top 4 seed. They had a good game. I'm not going to take anything away from their game that they did play. It was a good game, but probably didn't belong as a top 4 seed. Boise didn't belong as a top 4 seed. I think they both belonged in the playoff, but not as top 4 seeds. So, but in any case, I'm just glad to see Notre Dame win. I don't want to talk about it too long because this is a Chicago Bears podcast, and not everybody in our chat here is Irish.
I was just going to say, anybody in the chat who's got the score of that Ohio State game, feel free to fill us in because I'm going to be interested to see what happens there. I do think Ohio State's going to win. They've been looking really good, and they do scare me coming up against Notre Dame because we don't exactly have a consistent passing attack, and there's several injuries across the trenches for Notre Dame on both sides of the football that have come up to bite them a little bit. And it worries me.
They're still playing hard, and those backups have been really good. Like
they have, but you're
deep, very deep team.
Going up against a team like Ohio State or Texas, who those kind of teams, they always have guys up front who are really good, especially Texas. But I mean, right now, Ohio State really is good too. And the receivers are excellent. Notre Dame versus Ohio State receivers versus Notre Dame's defensive backs is going to be a really good matchup to see. I'm interested in. So in any case, like you said, let's kind of move on a little bit. I want to talk more about this Bears stuff going on because this is.
I want to ask one question to the chat real quick, Jeff. If you guys just leave a comment here. Who would you prefer Notre Dame to play in the national championship, Ohio State or Texas? I will just say quickly, I want Ohio State. I want a rematch of last year from that absolute garbage loss that Notre Dame had that they controlled and should have won the game. They lose at the end of the game the way they did was awful. I think that I want redemption personally. And I don't care if people think Ohio State's the better team. I think Notre Dame can be either one of these teams. I want it to be Ohio State personally.
I mean, as a Notre Dame fan, you want it to be Ohio State. Yeah, especially because of that, they got a sour taste in your mouth from the last loss. But again, though, they're really good and they kind of worry me as far as playing them for the national championship game. And I do think that they'll win. Texas, I think that in my honest opinion, I think Arch Manning's a better quarterback than Ewers is. And the fact that they, won't turn to him and just let him take the reins, in my opinion, is why they're going to hold themselves back from a national championship because they have a pretty damn good team. But in any case, Moving on, let's talk some Bears stuff here. We've got, like I said, there's a lot of names that have been floated around that the Bears are going to be interviewing. There's a big list. I believe it's 15 names, and they actually reached out to another, Mike McCarthy, who was denied his interview request by the Cowboys. So here's the list here. Aldo's got it on the screen. The guys have been reached out to so far, interviews requested for anyways, or have been otherwise reported as being interviewed or will be, are Pete Carroll, Mike Kafka, who is the offensive coordinator for the Giants, Drew Petzing, who's the offensive coordinator for the Arizona Cardinals, Mike Vrabel, who was the former head coach of the Tennessee Titans, Anthony Weaver, current defensive coordinator for Miami Dolphins, Aaron Glenn, current defensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions, Ben Johnson, as we all know, current offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions, Joe Brady, current offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills, Thomas Brown, current Bears interim head coach, Matt Campbell, Iowa State head coach right now, has been for quite some time now. Brian Flores, defensive coordinator for the Vikings. Cliff Kingsbury, offensive coordinator for the Washington Commanders. Todd Monken, offensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens. David Shaw, former head coach at the University of Stanford, or the Stanford University. I'm not 100% sure on that, but he coached Andrew Luck in college and developed him into the player he was. Arthur Smith, offensive coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And as I said before, Mike McCarthy, head coach of Dallas Cowboys, whose interview was declined by the Cowboys. However, his contract is up on Tuesday. If he is not extended by that time, he is free to interview wherever he would like, and we'll have to see how that plays out. So in any case, that is the list that has been reported as being either interviewed to this point or will be interviewed at some point in the future. And there are several guys on that list who have already been interviewed. Petzing is one. Mike Vrabel was the first one that was reported actually sent out by the Bears as being interviewed. Kafka was interviewed already, I believe. Pete Carroll, I believe, already interviewed, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. There's been four that are five that I know of. There's five that Anthony Weaver's is completed as well.
Anthony Weaver, yeah. So lots of candidates here, guys. Lots of different styles here. Lots of different backgrounds. Interested to see who gets second interviews in this process. To me, if you guys watched Gabriel Talks Football earlier, there's another show here on this channel on Barroom Network. It's our resident scout, Greg Gabriel, worked in the NFL for 30 plus years. He believes there's only really around 6 to 7 legitimate candidates who actually have a chance at this job. And the others are just kind of more or less picking their brains, information gathering type deal, fact finding missions, if you will. So in any case, I tend to agree with that. I really think there's only a handful of candidates on their radar right now in the initial process that they, I think, are legitimate candidates. However, I do believe there's a candidate or two in there who they interview that they'll be surprisingly intrigued by, and they may bring them back for another interview because of that. So we'll have to wait and see. But as I mentioned to you guys earlier, I have a list of my top 5 candidates, as does Tim, and we'll get to them in just a little bit here. But I want you guys' thoughts as well. Who do you guys like? Who is your favorite of these candidates so far? Give us your reasons why, and we'll try to get to them best we can. And any questions you have for us about any of these candidates, we'll do our best to answer, because I know not all of these guys are really well known outside of people who are pretty tuned into the league. So we'll get into some of those guys if any of you have questions about them. But Tim, what are some of your initial thoughts about this first list that was presented that the Bears have reached out to or are going to reach out to?
Well, number one, I know some people are against that they're bringing in so many candidates, but at the same time, how many people were complaining that there were not enough candidates the last time around. And I agree, there weren't enough candidates last time around. And I do believe that was pushed on Ryan Poles. I think he might've liked Eberflus, but I think they said, it was like a Bill Polian thing. Like, hey, I really like these 3 guys. You should choose one of them. But I do like that they're casting a much wider net this time. I agree with Greg that I think there's only a handful of serious candidates, but they're just trying to get an idea of what they're looking for, and they're picking brains, and they're also looking for possibly potential offensive and defensive coordinators out of this list. They're possibly looking for future coaching hires here. So, and I'm not just talking head coaching, something doesn't work out with these guys. Maybe they come in as an OC or DC later on. You never know. I do think it's the search is, getting information from as many people as you can. And I like that they're doing that. I think you can't leave any stone unturned, in my opinion here. We've screwed this up plenty of times. And I will admit, I do think this is I think things will go differently this time, because I think this is the first time in a long time that they've actually left it to a true football mind that has worked in the building to actually pick his own head coach on his own. I think this truly is Ryan Poles' decision, and he's not going to have, I think Kevin Warren's involved, but he's not going to have the outside influence that they had before. There's not going to be Bill Pulling. There's not going to be Ernie Accorsi, So in my opinion, it will be his opportunity to make the hire. I know it's interesting because you're not really sure, especially after that first press conference, after Flus was fired, Kevin Warren kind of made it about him. And then it looked like they went really out of their way to make sure that everybody knew that Ryan Poles was the point man this last go around. And by having McCaskey and Kevin Warren do their press conferences or do their interviews outside of the press conference room, which it is what it is. You're not really fooling anybody with that. It was clearly a PR move. But at the same time, I do believe that Ryan Poles is going to be the guy to make the decision. I do think Kevin Warren will certainly be in his ear, but I think they're going to leave it to the football guy to make the decision. Because at the end of the day, you have to. Because if this works out, great. And if it doesn't, you have to have the accountability for the GM. You can't pick his coach and then fire him when it doesn't work out. You can't do that. I mean, I'm sure teams have done that plenty of times in the past, but that's just malpractice. You cannot do that kind of thing. So you got to give him his opportunity and see where it goes. But I will tell you that of the coaches that have been interviewed thus far, which are Mike Vrabel, Drew, his name,
Petzing.
Petzing, thank you. Drew Petzing, Anthony Whitfield. Oh my gosh, I've got these names. Weaver. There's so many names. Mike Kafka, and forgetting the fifth one now, Pete Carroll. Of those, I believe the only serious candidates of those five are Vrabel and maybe Pete Carroll. I don't think the others are serious. Petzing didn't even get a full interview. He did not get the full 3 hours. It was probably like an hour or two at the most. I don't think he's a serious candidate. And I hope he's not, because I really don't think that's a good hire regardless. I'm very iffy on Arizona to begin with. Yeah, his offense was in the top 11, but they're bottom tier in a lot of statistical categories, especially when it comes to throwing the football. So I don't like that one as it is. Kafka, I think, is an interesting name because Kafka's got a lot of respect in the league and he's been very good. And sometimes good coaches are in bad situations, and I think New York is just a bad situation this year. I don't think let's face reality. Brian Daboll's not a bad head coach. Brian Daboll's a good coach. It's not like he forgot to be a good head coach in 1 year or 2 years. They just don't have a good roster there, and you can't put a lot of that on it because most of it's the quarterback position, which has been atrocious. So they shouldn't have doubled down on signing him, but they did. But regardless, I think Kafka's a good coach. I don't think you can put that, it's a taint. He's tainted because of the New York Giants job, but at the same time, he's a good head coach or a good coach. He could possibly be a good head coach. We don't know, but I think he's kind of an interesting name. I wouldn't completely count him out. But I think Petzing is a no-go, and Weaver, I think, I don't view him as a serious candidate either. But the Dolphins defense was pretty good. He is an interesting guy. Yep,
Notre Dame guy. He played with guys like Goolsby and Rocky Boyman and David Givens, and you remember those teams. I mean, those are some pretty good teams. And Weaver was a pretty damn good player too. But in any case, he's a relatively newer guy on the radar as far as head coaching candidates. But in any case, go ahead, Tim. I didn't even cut you off.
No, I agree totally. And then obviously on Saturday we have Vrabel and Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn both interviewing this coming Saturday. Those are also scheduled. And the rest of the interviews are not scheduled yet. So I'm not sure when those will happen. Obviously, Joe Brady can't be until next week at the early. What do they play on Saturday or Sunday?
I'm not 100% on that one.
I think Buffalo plays on Saturday. And if that's the case, they can be interviewed on Wednesday of next week. Or anybody that's playing in the Saturday games. So Monken and Brady, at the very earliest, they can't even be scheduled for an interview until next week. Kingsbury, same story. Let's see. Arthur Smith, same story. And I believe that's it of the ones that have not been scheduled yet. Those can't happen until next week. Obviously, they can interview Thomas Brown at any point. They can interview Matt Campbell at any point. They can interview, or Brian Flair is another one they can't interview until next week. They can interview David Shaw at any point, and Mike McCarthy, they can after Tuesday at any point, if in fact he does not get extended by Dallas. So in my opinion, this is it's an interesting pool of names. I want to tell you right now, I want Cliff Kingsbury taken off the list. I don't think he's a good head coach. He's obviously done some good things with quarterbacks, but your track record is Kyler Murray, and we've only seen one season of Jaden Daniels so far. I'm not so sure that he's that great of a quarterback whisperer either. Jaden Daniels is having a great year. We'll see what happens next year, in my opinion. I just think with Kingsbury, and this is I've said this all year. Everybody was talking about how, or not everybody, excuse me. A lot of people question, did we take the right guy? Did we take the right quarterback? Should we have taken Jaden Daniels? And I say, absolutely, we took the right guy. Jaden Daniels did not have nearly the responsibilities that Caleb Williams had. He was asked to do much more. As I've told you multiple times, Jeff, most of the throws from Jaden Daniels this year were his first read. Kingsbury does a great job of scheming open the first read. I will give him that. He does a great job of that. But he's not being asked to do much. All he's having to do really is manage and use his God-given ability, which he does have a ton of talent. Don't want to take that away from him. But Caleb Williams does too. And the difference is he's been asked to do a lot more, especially cerebrally. And I like that he has, because it's only going to help him in his experience as the years go. I'm telling you right now, I would almost bet my bottom dollar that Caleb Williams will have a better season next year than Jaden Daniels will. Just my opinion. And I probably would have told you that if I wasn't a Bears fan, just because of what he's been asked to do and what Daniels has not been asked to do. So I want Cliff Kingsbury off the list. I understand why they're interviewing him. You can't take anything away with what he's done with that offense over there. They have done well, but we'll see what happens as far as that goes. Some of the other names, I really like Munkin. David Shaw, I like, but he's been out of the game for a few years now, and he's never had a head coaching position in the NFL, although he did a great job at Stanford, and that's a tough place to coach just because it's hard to bring in athletes there.
Well, let's do this, Tim. Although, if there's any way you can put we've got our top 5 list. If there's any way you could put those side by side, Aldo, because they're pretty similar, and Tim and I can kind of debate on the guys we have that are similar, and then we can kind of go on our own tangents about the guys we have that are different. So if there's any way you can do that, Aldo, I'd appreciate it. But in the meantime, there are several intriguing names on this list. There are several on there that, as I said, Tim and I have that are the same, I guess, is, I don't know what the word would be right now, but in any case, we can't put them side by side. So here's what we'll do. I'll just give you my top 5 list. Then we'll give you Tim's top 5 list, and we'll go over the similarities and the differences. So I don't have a top guy. I have a hard time with this because I am one of those people who is very intrigued by the guy who's the obvious candidate, who everybody likes, but I'm also intrigued by the guys who've been there, done that. So I have a 1A, 1B, 1C. Ben Johnson, Mike Vrabel, Pete Carroll. And then I'll give you my 4 and 5 are Joe Brady and David Shaw, as Tim talked about just a second ago. And I'll give you my reasons why on these guys. And then Tim and I can kind of break it down further. So first, I'll tell you why David Shaw, because I don't think he's on Tim's list. But David Shaw, as Tim said before, he was the head coach at Stanford, a program that does not have a ton of ability and a ton of recruiting ability to get really high-level athletes on campus, because they have really strict policies academically. It's a very high academic institution there. So it's hard to get that kind of football talent. And the way David Shaw had that team competing the whole time he was a head coach there was really, really impressive. I mean, they had some really good teams there. Andrew Luck. He developed Andrew Luck into the quarterback he was heading into the NFL. And he was one of the better, if not the best, quarterback draft prospects in the last decade. So in my opinion, or a couple decades, I should say now, But in any case, I think David Shaw has a proven track record. As Tim said, he is a little bit removed from even the college game, but there's a reason even NFL teams have had their eye on him in the last several years. He just didn't want to take a job yet. Apparently, he's ready now. I wouldn't hate the move. It wouldn't be my favorite move either, though. So I'm just going to say I like it because of his track record of how good his teams were at Stanford with very little he had to work with. And also the fact that, he has proven it to be able to develop a quarterback in Andrew Luck and had him so NFL ready. So that was really nice to see. And yes, Pep Hamilton was on his staff there. I wouldn't be surprised if he brought Pep Hamilton in as his offensive coordinator if he was the head coach. So in any case, that would be a good thing to have. So that's kind of why I like David Shaw. I think Tim has all the same names as my top four. So let's look at Tim's list here and see who his different guy is or different guys. And Tim, give us your opinion on that. So here's Tim's top five. Tim,
let's start at 5 because our top 4 is the same top 4, just in a different order. My 5 is Todd Monken, and I like David Shaw as well, and I really like what David Shaw was able to do at Stanford. And I will agree that Pep Hamilton is definitely the one that developed Andrew Luck. He also developed Justin Herbert once he entered the NFL. He's definitely a quarterback whisperer. I think he's ready to be in the league again. He interviewed with New England for their head job. I think that was I don't want to call it a sympathy hire, but they did it to get to their Rooney Rule candidates. I think Pep would be an excellent quarterbacks coach, possibly an offensive coordinator. We'll see what he does. I think the Bears would be a great opportunity for him. I could see Vrabel bringing him in. I could see David Shaw bringing him in, either one. I mean, that would be awesome. And I think I say Vrabel or even Pete Carroll because they have the notoriety to bring him in. They probably have a relationship already from their time in the league. And obviously David Shaw had a long time in the league and he knew him from Stanford as well. So that would be interesting. But I'll talk about Todd Monken for a minute. Todd Monken obviously is the offensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens. Before that, he was the OC in Tampa Bay. Before that, after Tampa Bay, he was in Georgia. He was the OC at Georgia. Before that, then I'll say he was in Tampa as the OC. And before that, he was the head coach at Southern Miss. When he was at Southern Miss, the team was not very good. It's actually not a good program, never has been in college football. They weren't very good for a couple of years, and then they improved in his third year there. He did a decent job as their head coach. Again, though, tough program to coach at. Goes to Tampa. He's the OC there early in like Mike Evans' career and Chris Godwin. For the life of me, I cannot remember who the quarterback was at the time. It would have been the quarterback. It would have been after Glennon, but before Brady. And I cannot remember who that was. If anyone knows who that was in the chat, throw him in there. And then at Georgia, he was the OC there, helped develop. Again, I cannot think of the quarterback's name at Georgia. He was the longtime starter there, won the national championship there. I believe he was like a third-round draft pick just a couple of years ago. He did a great job of coaching and using his player skill sets to have success. And then obviously now in Baltimore, he's doing the same thing with a completely different quarterback and style of play with Lamar Jackson is what he had from his quarterback at Georgia. And he's just done a great job of using what the talent is and making it work, which is, I think, something we've been clamoring for a couple of years now. Something Matt Nagy refused to do because he was so stuck in his ways with the system. Eberflus promised us was going to happen, but then when Luke Getsy was here, refused to do. And we didn't see much of it either with Shane Waldron and Thomas Brown trying to use that same offense that Waldron brought in. It just was tough, I think, for Thomas Brown in that situation. But Monken I think he's a great candidate for the position. I don't know what he's got head coaching experience, which is a huge plus. Again, not a very good school, and it's in the college game. So it's a totally different thing in the NFL, but he's got a lot of experience coaching in the NFL. He's an offensive coach, like we know. I don't know what kind of quarterback developer he is. Hard to tell, but he clearly knows how to coach to player strengths. So I do like Monken. I think of the candidates there are, I think he is somebody who absolutely should garner some serious consideration for the job. Again,
Well, I will say
I don't think he's my top choice, but I do think he should be in the running.
I will say Lamar Jackson has taken a huge jump in his passing in the last couple of years under Todd Monk, and the way he has really developed as a passer in the last couple of years. It's impressive. And so I will say, to me, he's the clear MVP because of the season he's had. But in any case, Monken, I think he's done a good job in Baltimore. The biggest problem I have with him is he has an issue to abandon the run game in big moments, especially in the playoffs when it's working for them, and he's putting too much on the shoulders of his quarterback when he doesn't need to.
I think he probably learned
that
from
kind of bothers me. And he's never. I mean, I don't know. I just don't see him. He doesn't look like a guy to me. He doesn't seem like a guy to me that's going to light the world on fire in front of a team, and just, have them playing, like want to really play for him and be a really good disciplinarian, any of that thing. So I don't know. I just don't see it. That's not he's not a guy that I have on my list, but that's just my personal opinion in my top 5 list anyway. So, but let's kind of go over the guys we have similarities on here. And before we get into Vrabel any more than we need to, there is obviously a lot of talk out there, guys, that Mike Vrabel is the favorite in New England, which they've barely interviewed anybody. And he's one of the few that they've actually interviewed. And he's the only guy they interviewed in person. So it's almost like for a lot of people think it's pretty much a done deal. We'll have to wait and see. The Raiders have interviewed him too. They want him also. So we'll have to wait and see how that goes. But I like Mike Vrabel a lot for obvious reasons. He's the kind of guy, in my opinion, who did a lot with little when he was in Tennessee. I mean, you're talking about a guy who also, he didn't have the best quarterbacks there. Ryan Tannehill and Marcus Mariota were his quarterbacks, and he found a way to win. We went to the playoffs 3 times in 4 years or something. So Vrabel, I mean, he's an impressive guy from a leadership standpoint, and he's another guy that ain't going to take no shit. So I think the Bears really need something like that. So I would not mind
perfect fit in Chicago. Perfect fit.
And right now, in my opinion, he would be a perfect fit there because of those reasons. But the big question is how well will the quarterback develop under him, and can he get them to a Super Bowl? We know he can have success. We know he can take a team to the playoffs. Can he get a team a Super Bowl? In my opinion, like I said, he did a lot with less than what he probably should have. In my opinion, I think that Tennessee's roster was not as good as it could have been as a typical playoff roster. At least that's just, like I said, in my opinion. They were good. They had Derrick Henry. They had good pieces there, but still, I feel like he was doing a pretty good job in Tennessee, and I like the fit here in Chicago as well. What are your thoughts on him, Tim, before we move on to some of our other candidates? Obviously, I want to dig into Ben Johnson because, in my opinion, he's probably the guy I'm leaning to most as my favorite candidate right now.
Well, I just want to address a comment Cliff made in here. He was talking about Aaron Glenn denying the request to be interviewed by New England. And he says, why would Aaron Glenn turn down a New England interview unless he thinks there's no chance he gets hired there? I don't know why everybody thinks that it's a done deal with Vrabel. Vrabel's already been interviewed and he wasn't offered the job yet. They got their Rooney Rule interviews out of the way. They could hire him right now if they want to. And if he in fact was the guy they wanted, why has he not accepted that job yet? I don't think it's a done deal with him.
Maybe he just doesn't like the situation there.
That's what I was going to say. The situation's not great there. Yeah, he played there, but he also played with Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. They're not there, and I know he would be the head coach, not Belichick, obviously, but the franchise is not the same team it was when Vrabel was there. Just because you have ties there doesn't mean you want to be. Look at Jim Harbaugh. He wanted no part of the Bears job, even though everybody thought he did. Harbaugh wanted no part of the Bears job, even though he played here. That doesn't necessarily matter. And here's the other part of this. Robert Kraft, I wouldn't want to play for him. He circumvents the system all the time. Look what he did to Belichick at the end of his time there. He loved Tom Brady, but I mean, when the guy's winning you 7 titles, wouldn't you? I mean, but I don't think that's a great situation. They have a good quarterback, but they don't have anything else. The roster it's garbage. It's terrible, if we're being honest. It's not a good roster. Why would you want to come into that when you could have a better opportunity elsewhere? In my opinion, Vrabel's going to have his choice of job. He's going to get to go where he wants to go. I think he's the top candidate in this cycle of anybody. And I'll get to that later. But in my opinion, why would you go to New England? I don't know why anybody would want to right now. It's not a good fit for anybody, in my opinion. It's a tough job right now. So I don't agree that, he's not interviewing because of that. I think Aaron Glenn just doesn't want to be a part of that. And also maybe he declined the interview because he's the favorite in New Orleans. That's the place everybody thinks that he's going to go. And I think that's probably a done deal at this point. He's got a great relationship with Mickey Rooney. Or Mickey Loomis, not Mickey Rooney, Mickey Loomis. And, he played in New Orleans. I just think that's the fit for Aaron Glenn. And so that's probably why. So that's my opinion on that. So now we can get into Vrabel. So Vrabel's my number one, Jeff. I know he's not necessarily your number one, but he is my number one. I do like Ben Johnson and some of the other candidates, but I think Vrabel is the guy because for several reasons. Number one, you know what you're going to get from Vrabel already. He's already done this. He's already been a head coach. He can command a room. He's going to be that Ditka-esque guy that they are desperately in need of. They need a guy like that. I understand he's a defensive-minded guy, but he's a head coach. He's not going to just pick one side of the ball or the other. He is the guy. He's the right person to do this because, again, I want a head coach. I don't want a flus who claimed to be the head coach, but he was more focused on the defense, number one. Didn't know what was going on offensively. I think he was clueless offensively. So but I think Vrabel is good on both sides. Greg mentioned in his show that Mike Vrabel was like the de facto offensive line coach in Cleveland this year. He wasn't an offensive lineman. He was a defensive player. But that's, another tool in his tool bag. He clearly has an idea of both sides of the ball. Like he's a good coach. He's a good head coach. So, and I think that situation in Tennessee at the end, I'm sure some of that fault was on him, but that roster was not very good. They never gave him a better quarterback. They traded away his receiver who he did not want gone, which was A.J. Brown. He was pissed when they traded him away. So there was a lot going on in that situation. But Vrabel brings you the head coach that you need, in my opinion, as far as that goes. And he also has the allure. I think he's going to get whatever OC or DC candidate he wants. Gerard Mayo just got fired from New England. Maybe he brings Mayo with him as his DC. Maybe Flores wants to come be his DC at some point. They have a great relationship. And offensively, maybe he brings in Pep Hamilton or somebody like that. I think he's going to have more options for who he wants than people realize. I will say this though. If there's any chance that he wants to bring Josh McDaniels, I don't want Mike Vrabel either. I do not want Josh McDaniels. The only time that he was a good coach in the NFL as an offensive coordinator is when he had Tom Brady. I don't want Josh McDaniels. Tom Brady was good with everybody. Doesn't matter who it is. So I want no part of Josh McDaniels in this building. He's a joke. So if that's the case, I don't want Vrabel. But I don't know that is the case. I think Vrabel's a smart guy. He knows he's going to find somebody who can develop Caleb. He's going to find somebody who can develop a quarterback. And again, I think he'll have his choice of coordinators, whoever he wants.
I was just going to say, look, I mean, we talked about this earlier. There's some commenters who've said some stuff about it in here too. Obviously, Vrabel, there's a lot of talk. He's the favorite in New England. He's probably going to be, announced as the head coach before too long. If it doesn't happen in the next couple of days, I believe that there's something actually going on there. But I kind of expect that to happen too. I really like Mike Vrabel. He's one of the top candidates on my list too. One of the concerns for me is, as a lot of you guys probably have a concern about it too, and it's the same thing with Pete Carroll, really, is that if they were to, obviously they're going to bring in a coordinator to run the offense and call the plays. So if that's the case, and that guy has a really good season and that guy takes off to be the head coach somewhere else, what is the succession plan there to continue the offense humming and rolling? Because that can be an issue sometimes. Whereas if you bring an offensive guy like Ben Johnson to run your offense, that he's not going to change to a different play caller. You're going to have that same offensive play caller for hopefully the entirety of Caleb Williams' career if he plays his cards right and he does a good job. So that's the upside there. The upside of the Ben Johnson is more than anybody else on the list. That's the biggest thing. The upside there is enormous. The play calling, the play design is fantastic. And so there's a question in here that I actually want to get to right now because it's a good question from Antmus. He asked a while back. He says, Ben Johnson benefited from an elite O-line. Monken benefited from Jackson and Henry. Do you believe either of those two are as good as people think? So first of all, Tim likes Monken more than I do, but I'll say that Monken is not as good as people think, in my opinion, because I do think he's kind of benefited from his personnel in a lot of cases. And again, I feel like he's kind of abandoned the run game in some really crucial moments where, why would you not be handing the ball off there kind of thing. So, and also he just hasn't had a ton of success in his background either, in my opinion. There's not a lot of people that are ranting and raving about Todd Monken's play design. So that's just my honest opinion on that one. Ben Johnson, however, yes, I do think he's as good as people think he is. The part where can he be a significant head coach and actually lead the whole organization and just be the head guy while running the offense and also bring on a good staff and all those things? That's the question. But I think that I think he's pretty well respected around the league. I don't think he's going to have an issue bringing in a good staff. I just, and the big thing about him, again, is like I said, with the upside, it's like he's going to take over the offense. And immediately as a play designer, you are really not concerned that he's going to draw up some stuff that's going to give your quarterback some success. As you say, though, Ant-Miss, they obviously do have an elite O-line in Detroit. We don't have that in Chicago. Obviously, there's going to be some moves that take place there to fortify that front. At least we hope so. There should be. If there's not, we have a serious issue there. But at the same time, we've seen his play design and what it looks like. And we've seen how a guy like Jared Goff, who in my opinion is not a great quarterback, who has been able to have excellent quarterback play in the last couple of years because of the way that Ben Johnson has been able to scheme that offense and make it run. Again, they have a great offensive line. They do give him more time. They are really good in the run game. They give the running backs push, but they have good play design from a running and a passing perspective. So it does drive that whole offense and has it going. He's a really, really, really high upside candidate. That is why, in my opinion, I'm leaning towards him as my favorite right now, because if you can get the next Sean McVay, the next Kyle Shanahan, the next Kevin O'Connell, if you can get the next Matt LaFleur, you do that. And to me, Ben Johnson, if there's anybody in this cycle that's that guy, it's Ben Johnson. So I think if you get a chance at him, you take the swing and you get him if you can. I also do like, as I was talking about earlier, I will go through a little bit more on my list. Do you have any more comments on Ben Johnson, Tim, before I move into Pete Carroll a little bit? And why I would like that also?
I really like Ben Johnson too, and I think that he's my number 2 choice if they don't get Vrabel. But I will say I am a little concerned about the not being a head coach before. I think that's always going to be a concern when a guy's never been a head coach. I'm also a little concerned just from what I've seen of him in his press conferences. I don't see him quite as the guy that can really lead a room. Maybe he is. I don't know that. I'm just speaking on, he's a little more of that tame personality. I want a guy with some fire. Again, I don't know that he's not that guy. It doesn't seem like that guy, at least in his press conferences. I know the players like playing for him. I don't doubt, and I've heard that, and I don't doubt it. Play calling. Someone put in here that they're afraid he's Nagy 2.0. Big difference. Matt Nagy called plays for 6 games, and it wasn't good. Ben Johnson's called plays for 3 years, and he's been excellent.
He does have an extensive history of elite play calling and play design, and Matt Nagy has that umbrella of being underneath Andy Reid. Nobody really knows how much of the offense he had control of. So that's an excellent point, Tim.
Yeah, I mean that's shut up. I mean that's, like I said, three elite seasons of calling plays. Excuse me, and they've been very good. The big thing also is Detroit hasn't won anything. They've done what they did. Okay. They've been to the playoffs once in his time there last year, and they were very good last year. And they were close 2 years ago. They won like 6 games in a row to end the season. But again, they didn't go to the playoffs. Last year, they made it to the NFC Championship game. This year, we'll see what happens. They have the bye. If they get to the Super Bowl, that's a different story because now that's experience in the Super Bowl. But again, another reason I like Mike Vrabel, he played in Super Bowls, won them. And another thing they're not talking about is who was the quarterback in New England when Mike Vrabel was there? It was Tom Brady. You're telling me he couldn't have picked up some things from Tom Brady to help develop a quarterback? Look at Ryan Tannehill. You think that was all just his offensive coordinators? I think Mike Vrabel had something to do with that too. I really do. But again, we're not talking about Mike Vrabel right now. We're talking about Ben Johnson. So again, he's my number 2 choice. I do like Ben Johnson a lot. I don't think he's quite like a Matt Nagy or some of these other guys who had never been head coaches before. I really do think that Ben Johnson is going to have success as a head coach. How much, I don't know, and I'm not sure what kind of leader he truly is. They do have to fix that locker room culture. They've got to have a fiery personality who can get on to guys and not be afraid to call guys out, because clearly Flus did not do that, even though he claimed he did. The culture sucked. So they do need that kind of personality. Hopefully Ben Johnson can be that guy. But again, you don't always have to be that person as long as the guys respond to you. If you make it known that you're not going to tolerate things, but you can also be a player's coach. Some guys, Andy Reid can do that. There's a lot of guys that can do that. So maybe that's the case. Maybe that's the kind of leader he is. And if that's the case, that's fine. We just need somebody who can do it.
There's an interesting point in here from our resident Lions fan here, Don Burtim, that I want to mention. That he says that Ben is an excellent play caller. He can lead a position room. Can he lead a 53-man roster? I don't know. That's the big question, right, with everybody, is can he lead the team, right? Can he be a Super Bowl winning head coach?
He's probably just saying that because he doesn't want Ben Johnson getting hired somewhere else. He wants to keep him in Detroit.
Here's the thing, though, is like if he can lead the room in a position room and an offensive room, I think he can probably lead a team. And in the Bears, in my opinion, with this fit here, if he shows his offensive culpability against a defense who is already very good, and if no matter, in my opinion, you'd have to bring in a complete schmuck to screw up the defense that the Bears have right now, because they have pieces. They can be an outstanding defense. So if you bring in a guy like Johnson, and in practice, he's showing an ability to beat that defense and do some things in practice to where they're like, okay, this guy is legit as a play caller, and they're backing him, then now you're talking about he's leading the team, and it doesn't take long to get there. So that's my opinion on that front. I think he's a good fit if he can do those things. But again, though, the big question mark is, can he lead the team to a Super Bowl as a head coach? Can he do that? Is he just a good offensive play designer and play caller, or can he be a head coach? We'll have to wait and see. But in my opinion, that's the direction I would lean because of the upside. And I think it's about time the Bears saw if they had the next Shanahan, Sean McVay, like I said before, Matt LaFleur, Zach Taylor, whoever, so that's just my thoughts on that.
I agree.
So we have one more guy on both our lists. Let's get to it real quick because there are a couple of questions in here that I want to get to. We have two more. Oh, Pete Carroll. That's right. I almost forgot about Pete Carroll. So I'll make this quick because let me just put it to you guys this way. My entire life growing up, I have had great disdain for Pete Carroll. I cannot stand Pete Carroll. You know why I can't stand Pete Carroll? Because he always beats my
crap out of Notre Dame.
Always. When Notre Dame and USC they've always had a rivalry going now for years and years and years and years. Pete Carroll, when they had their thing going at USC with Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart and whoever else they had in those times, they used to kick the living piss out of Notre Dame. And it was bothersome because it was always in big moments where Notre Dame had a chance to do something and then they'd have to settle to play in like the Gator Bowl or something, and then they get their ass kicked there too. So it was unfortunate, and it brings back a lot of bad memories with Pete Carroll, but he's an excellent coach. Then when he finally got the job in Seattle, I kept thinking to myself, he's going to be terrible there. There's no way he's going to make that jump. He's done this before, and it didn't work out. Sure as shit, he's fantastic in Seattle. Wins the Super Bowl. He's had multiple teams there that were really, really good. I think he had two teams.
Weren't good when he got there. They were not good when he got there.
No, not at all. They hadn't been good in years. Mm-hmm. And so, if ever, and he gets there, and all of a sudden he turns the whole program around. So, Pete Carroll, the big question mark with him, as I said before, there's two of them really. The big one is his age. Does he have a succession plan for when he inevitably retires? Because he's getting old, and you can't expect him to be there forever. So you got to have a succession plan in place for someone who's going to take over for him eventually. And the other question is, if he brings in a play caller offensively who has a really good season, then that guy takes a job somewhere else. Can he keep churning in? Do you have a guy that you can bring in or promote that's going to take over for Caleb and keep leading him? And I don't know if that's the problem you want to have anyways. So
that's also that guy also has to win over front office too. And that may not be it's easy to say that you're going to pair him with the guy that's going to take over, but it doesn't always work that way. It's not always great. It just happened in New England. That's why Mayo's fired.
Pete Carroll's also shown an ability to develop quarterbacks too. So we got to remember that from that perspective as well. Matt Leinart was good in college. When he got to Seattle in the first place, Russell Wilson developed from a third-round pick. Look at the seasons Geno Smith had under Pete Carroll. A lot of people gave that credit to Shane Waldron, but how about Pete Carroll? He's the head coach there, and look at what he did with him. So, and on top of that, again, he's just had success.
Carson Palmer too in college
lately. So it's like, Carson Palmer. Almost forgot about Carson Palmer. So this guy is a guy who has been shown an ability to be an elite head coach at the professional and the college level. He's won a Super Bowl. He's competed for national championships. I think USC did win a national championship with Pete Carroll, as a matter of fact, maybe more than one. So in any case, that's the pedigree there that you like. But again, the worry that you have is the age and the other factor of like who's going to take over. What if your coordinator gets a new job somewhere else? But that's a good problem to have. So, Pete Carroll is a good coach. If they hired him, I would not hate that at all. Again, that's why he's my 1C there with Ben Johnson and Mike Vrabel. But what are your thoughts on Pete Carroll, Tim? Like I said, in my opinion, I like the guy a lot, and I would not hate the move if they.
No, I'll try to be quick. I would be okay with Pete Carroll as well. I'd be more than okay. I'd be happy with that. I will say we would all prefer to have a guy that would be there for 10 to 15 years, but Pete Carroll will come in there right away, change the culture, bring a winning attitude. He'll bring energy that we haven't had. Very energetic coach, especially for a guy that's going to be 74. Obviously knows how to coach a team. He's been a Super Bowl champion. He's been to 2 Super Bowls. He will definitely come in, change the culture, and get this team ready to go. If in 3 or 4 years he can make us a perennial playoff team in that time, I would be fine with that, because once the team learns how to win, then it's easier to win with a different coach. Sometimes it's not just the coach. The team has to also know how to win. So I would not be against Pete Carroll at all. That's my 2 cents on it. I would be happy with him being hired. Obviously not my first choice, but I would definitely be fine with it. And I think he could bring in good coaches with him as well.
Let me take a time out real quick, just because I was scrolling back and saw a funny comment here from Aldo. He says the Bears need that staff sergeant from Full Metal Jacket. Yeah. Could you imagine Sergeant Cartman standing in front of that team? Oh, it'd be hilarious. But anyways, go ahead. I mean, I got a good laugh out of that one. Go ahead.
So yeah, that's my thing on Pete Carroll. Let's jump into the last candidate in our top 5, Jeff. I really like him. I have him number 3 on my list, Joe Brady. Again, a guy who doesn't have a ton of experience as an offensive coordinator in the NFL, but has an incredible success as an offensive coordinator in the time he's been there. He and for who he has developed. He's responsible for the development of since Joe Burrow when he was at LSU, quarterback coach there. Maybe he was the offensive coordinator. What's that?
He was the receivers coach.
I still think he was the one responsible for that development. In my opinion.
Guess who he's the receivers coach for there? Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase.
Exactly. So Joe Brady's had a ton of success with those guys. And when Joe Burrow was at Ohio State, he wasn't expected to be what he ended up becoming at LSU. He kind of just flipped the switch in 1 year and became best quarterback in college football, the number 1 pick. And then he goes to Buffalo after that, becomes the quarterback coach there. You can't tell me that Joe Brady didn't have something to do with Josh Allen's development. He clearly did. And now once Dable leaves, they promote their quarterback coach, which was Dorsey. That's when Dorsey was hired. That's the year that Brady came in to be the quarterback's coach. And the offense is not doing well. They're lulling. They fire him, and immediately off the bat, that offense takes off when Joe Brady's given the offensive coordinator role. And this year, the offense has just been humming again. He does a great job of using his personnel. He's very innovative. Matter of fact, if you ask Greg, who talks about this on his show, he's the most innovative play caller in the NFL right now. The way he's able to scheme things up that people aren't seeing. He's done motions, all kinds of things. He's very, very good at that. And you could see that with their offense. It's just humming. For that aspect,
I would argue that it's Ben Johnson, but Joe Brady does do a very good job, yes.
Yeah, I would argue back and just say, in my personal opinion, if we're talking strictly offense and who I think who could possibly have a better offense, I would prefer Joe Brady over Ben Johnson even. The difference is Ben Johnson's done it for 3 years. Joe Brady's done it for a year and a half, which that does make a difference, but it's not a huge difference in time. But Joe Brady only has a few years experience in the NFL. He's a little bit younger than Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson's been in the NFL for like 19 years. He's been in the league for a long time. So he's got a ton of experience. But I do really like Joe Brady. And I think offensively, that would be a guy personally for quarterback perspective. And I think he would be the best person to bring in for Caleb Williams. I think there's two guys you could bring in that would really develop Caleb. Number one, as a head coach, it would have to be for your head coach who's already an OC would be Joe Brady. And the other one would be Pep Hamilton, just because of his track record with quarterbacks. But you're not bringing him as the head coach. But again, I think of the candidates, Joe Brady, in my opinion, is the biggest dark horse. That's the guy that I don't think is getting enough talk for the possibility of him being hired here. He's done a great job in Buffalo. Buffalo's a winning team every year. They win every year. Now, they haven't been to the Super Bowl yet. I think this year might be a different story. I think this might be the year for them. I really do.
I'll say one thing real quick about Joe Brady. If you hire Joe Brady, you're giving yourself a pretty good chance to develop both your quarterback and your receivers, especially Rome Odunze, who was your number 9 pick last year, a guy who's had success developing receivers, as I mentioned in his past, with Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase when they won the national championship. And yeah, I believe he was. I know he was the receivers coach, but I believe he was the offensive coordinator that year at LSU as well.
I believe so.
So he probably did have, he probably was in Joe Burrow's ear as well and had a part in his development. So, in any case, that's you're killing two birds with stone if you do that. So that's I like that move too. But again, it's the same thing with Johnson. Can he lead the entire organ? Can he lead the whole team? Can he bring in coordinators that run the show on defense and can do the job on offense, even though he's the play caller? Can he be the guy? Can he lead them to wins? Can he win in the playoffs? Can he make the game management decisions? All those things that you question, all those things that they've seen issues with in Chicago in the past several years. So, that remains to be seen. That's why
here's an interesting question, Jeff, for you. What are the odds? I hope this wouldn't happen, but what would be the odds if Joe Brady, in fact, were to be hired by the Bears? What would be the chance that he would keep Eric Washington as a defensive coordinator? They have history together from Buffalo.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean,
why would you want to change it at this point? You don't have to.
If you're Washington, that's a good move for you because do you really see anybody else hiring you as the defensive coordinator?
Right.
Maybe, but you have a good situation in Chicago. You can lead these guys to play good football. Look at the last couple of games. They played excellent ball. They really did. And that was without their starting safety. That's without much of a pass rush the entire season. They've been pretty damn good the last couple of games, and they were falling off for a while there without Eberflus. So that was a positive, the way they improved the last couple of games under Eric Washington. So I wouldn't be surprised if he did that, and it wouldn't be a bad move either.
There's something I want to mention, too, before I forget, Jeff, real quick. I will say, regardless who the head coach is, do you know who I would love to see them bring in as defensive coordinator? I'll give you one guess.
Is it a 3-4 or a 4-3 coach?
It's kind of I believe it's basically a 3-4, but they do run a lot of 4-3 concepts, and obviously they run nickel too.
Al Golden.
Yes.
I don't know you're going to say that. I wouldn't hate Al Golden either, to be honest with you, but I like having him.
I love Al Golden for a lot of reasons. Number one, he can clearly coach the defense. He can clearly develop talent everywhere. He has developed that defense. I'm sure Marcus Freeman has a ton to do with that because he's a linebacker, but the DBs, the defensive line, his play calling is fantastic. And I will say this, his pass rush, he is incredible at how he is able to scheme that up. His looks he does a really good job of confusing and disguising and bringing exotic pressures. He knows when to time it perfectly. Look at last night. At the biggest moments, he was able to make it happen. I think Al Golden would be great in the NFL. I think that wouldn't be a big drop off at all. I don't think it matters if he's in the college or pros. I think he could coach defense in either place and be excellent. I think he would be really good with this Bears team.
I'll say I wouldn't hate if he was the guy that they brought in as the defensive coordinator with whoever they hired as the head coach. But in any case, we're running out of time. There's probably a couple more questions we can get to in here. What do we got so far? We answered the one here from Ant Miss. Here's one from 3.5 Houston. Serious question. If you're polls, would you hire Gabriel? He's talking about Greg Gabriel, our resident scout here on the network, as a consultant helping him for coach searching. I'll just say this. I think anybody who is able to pick the brain about football operation, from a scouting perspective, an evaluation perspective, from a firsthand in the room front office perspective, Greg Gabriel is a great mind to pick for that. Absolutely fantastic mind to pick for that if you're looking to do that. That being said, Ryan Poles has to show his mettle right now, in my opinion. Yep. And Kevin Warren's going to be a part of this too, obviously. He's got his hand in here too. But Ryan Poles has to show that this is not a group like Bill Polian, showing a committee from Bill Polian showing him that these are the candidates that you should like and these are the guys you should be hiring. And he ends up choosing one of them. This is like his process. They chose all these candidates that they like. They're going to interview all these guys, and they're going to decide who they like the best, and they're going to hire that guy. It's going to be an exhaustive process. So, in my opinion, that's what has to happen. They have to decide on their own. They have to decide on their token who it's going to be, because at the end of the day, this decision is going to be what makes or breaks Ryan Poles' career. So, if he gets the head coach right, you have a lot of success in Chicago for a long time. If you get it wrong, you're probably setting yourself back 10 or 15 years, like Kevin Warren said in the press conference, because now you're risking the development of your quarterback that you just tied your franchise to. And now you have a head coach that you're tied to for at least, 3 to 4 years, depending on how good or bad they are. It's highly doubtful you're going to fire them after year one. So unless it's just a dumpster fire, but in any case, this is going to set your organization back if you get it wrong. So you got to get it right. So give him his chance to get it right and see what happens.
I'll try to answer this as quickly as I can. If you're talking from a consulting role, absolutely not. I don't think anybody should be in there consulting Ryan Poles. I think he needs to make the decision, like Jeff said, all on his own. I will say Greg has tons and tons of information. He knows he's got unlimited connections in the NFL and surrounding the NFL. That's somebody, if you want help, finding candidates, information on those candidates, not finding candidates, finding information on them, or listening to what knowledge do you have on this? Yes, I absolutely believe you could use Greg Gabriel for that. And let's be real. Who's the last good head coach in Chicago? Lovie Smith. Who hired Lovie Smith? Jerry Angelo. And who was the scouting director? Greg Gabriel. So, that would definitely be an asset you should use if that were the case. But again, as far as a consulting role, I don't think you should have anybody consulting.
You got a good point, Tim. Greg was on the staff the last time the Bears hired a winning head coach in Chicago. So, why not listen to what he's got to say? So in any case, I agree with that. So last question here from Vizo. This is a great question, Vizo. Yes. He wants to know, if Ben Johnson does get the job, what are the realistic expectations for him in 2025? Look, it's hard to not improve on what they were this year. You got to be better than you were now. I don't want to put anything like playoff expectations or winning record expectations, any of that stuff, because we've been there, done that, and it always bites us in the ass. So here's what I'll say. They better be effing competitive if Ben Johnson gets the job. And the offense better look good too. They better look good doing it. We better see improvement from Caleb Williams, like real obvious improvement in his footwork, being able to move the football down the field accurately, which he had issues with this year, which he hasn't in the past. So you got to get his footwork right. You got to get that corrected. And then I want to see that he's getting better in just the general aspects of quarterbacking in the game, getting from read to read, the timing that has to take place there, being on pace with your receivers, all those things. So that's what I want to see. I want to see improvement there from him. I want to see the overall offensive structure get better. And I want to see him have input with the offensive line and what they're going to do with the offensive line in the offseason if he gets the job. So that's a great question, Vizo, and that's my opinion on that. So what do you think, Tim?
Oh my gosh, I just lost train of thought. I will say that, in my opinion, I think that I agree with you. Expectations should not be playoffs. There's a long way to go. We got to see how the team gels, if they can develop under him. There's a lot to happen in the first year. That's a tough ask. I would give 8 or 9 wins, I think, would be reasonable to expect, because they should improve on where they're at now. Absolutely should, especially with Caleb in his second year. You would think that the wins could get to, I would imagine top 15-ish offense. I wouldn't say top 10 or anything like that, but they would definitely come out of the bottom cellar. I would think they would at minimum improve into the top 20 with Ben Johnson. They better. I mean, obviously that's the whole reason you're bringing him in there. So yeah, I think that would definitely bring some wins on the board. Again, who knows about clock management? That's a big thing. We don't know how he is in that part of the game, late game decision making. We'll see. But again, yeah, I would say 8 to 9 wins would be a fair expectation for his first year. 3.5 says 8-9 wins is a failure. I don't think it's a failure for your first season as a head coach. Disagree with that. But I do think that 8 or 9 wins and top 20 to top 15 range would be fair.
They just need to be competitive in like every damn game. Really, they have the roster to be competitive in every damn game, and they need to be. Period. You know, I don't care if they win. I don't care if they win 10 games or 12 games or 8 games. As long as they are competitive in every game, I'll be happy. And like I said, you better see some freaking improvement from your quarterback and the rest of the offense too, because you haven't seen that development that you want to see. Caleb has looked pretty good. Like I said, I don't want to take anything away from him and say he's not developing, because he's doing a pretty good job. But again, the footwork and stuff, there's got to be real improvement there in the offseason, and I expect that to be the case.
I'm going to push back on you just a little bit. I agree on Caleb does need to develop, and that his development is very important, but I'm done with that. Last year it was, it doesn't matter how many games we win as long as the quarterback's developing. He's definitely developing. I care about wins at this point. I don't care anymore. We
all do.
I know, but I want to see a significant difference in the winning culture. I want to see them winning games. I don't care if they win by a point. I don't care if they average 1 yard in the game or pick up 1 yard in the game. I want to see them win games. That's what I want to see right now. And yes, I do want the development, of course, but they need to win. And it's got to be at least double not double this year, but they got to at least win 3 or 4 more games than they won this year. Or I do think that's a little bit of a failure for sure.
Yeah. Well, I look, I tend to agree, but at the same time, it's like, it's hard. It's awfully hard to do because of how much growth they need to have take place here. But there were so many 1-score games. I wouldn't be surprised to see them make a real run if they got some decent coaching, because the roster is pretty good. Again, the trench play they need better trench play, period. And if they don't get that improved, I don't see them making any kind of run. So
I think they need 4 offensive linemen. I think they need 4 new offensive linemen.
Yeah. And at least 2 new defensive linemen. So, we'll have to see what happens. But in any case, Tim, stand up a little bit so we can see what your shirt says. As we know, Notre Dame is playing for a national championship. Play like a champion today.
Well, this can go for the Bears too. Coach like a champion today. Start winning some freaking football games. Bring a championship culture. Don't bring in. That's why I was so upset about the leader of men thing at first. Yeah, I want a guy that can come in here with a fiery personality. I agree. But come on. Bring a winning culture. Not a Matt Eberflus who's never won anything in his life. Bring a winning culture. Bring a Vrabel. Bring a Pete Carroll. Bring somebody who has won in the league. That's what we need. A winning championship culture. Not just a leader of men. A championship culture.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind it. Like I said, again, so you guys saw my list. So that's my thoughts on it. You guys have heard what we have to say. We'll obviously get more into it as the weeks roll along and we see how this list gets pared down, who they bring in for second interviews, and we'll get a better idea what they're thinking, guys. So we really appreciate you guys being here. As always, it was a great show tonight. Slick Sophistication says with Poles calling the show, I wouldn't be upset with Carroll. I hope we get this right. So we'll have to see what happens. But, I wouldn't mind Pete Carroll either. I really wouldn't. So, in any case, like I said, the 5 guys I had on my list, I wouldn't hate any of them. I have a 1A, 1B, 1C for reason, and Ben Johnson, Mike Vrabel, and Pete Carroll. So, again,
I'll quickly say, Jeff, too. And Jeff, I'm sure you agree with me. If, in fact, Mike McCarthy enters free agency on Tuesday, he immediately jumps into the top 5. 100%.
Yeah. 100%, because he's been there, done that, won a Super Bowl. So, and he's had success everywhere he goes.
His record is better than Mike Vrabel's too. Higher win percentage. He had 3 straight 12-win seasons in Dallas. The guy can coach. So
he's had his down years, but the guy has won everywhere he's been. So
yep.
Anyways, guys, like I said, we appreciate you being here tonight. It was a great show. As always, guys, please do us a favor and like the video, subscribe to the channel. You can find us here on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts at Barroom Network. You can also find our executive producer on X at Barroom Network. That's Aldo Gandia. You can also find us on X as well. I am at _Jeff Willis. Tim is at Tim Willis 24. And until next time, we'll see you guys next week. Let's bear down.
Got Bears.
This is my rifle, this is my gun. This is for fighting, this is for fun. This is my rifle, this is my gun. This is for fighting, this is for fun. This is my rifle, this is my gun. This is for fighting, this is for fun. This is my rifle, this is my gun. This is for fighting, this is for fun.
The Willis Twin Towers podcast is a Barroom Network production. Jeff and Tim Willis are the co-hosts and co-producers. Aldo Gandia is executive producer. Music is licensed from Pond 5. Any copyrighted material used was done under the Fair Use Doctrine for commentary, criticism, and informative purposes. All of our programming is available in audio-only format by subscribing to the Barroom Network wherever you download podcasts. Videos are archived on YouTube.